Hello, this is Yahweasel, and in this video I will describe plip. So plip is a suite of software used to make the recording process and editing process of typically Let's Play videos, but whatever video you might want to record in OBS, a bit easier. So there are some tasks in the recording of this kind of video, of gaming videos, that are standard, that you always do every time you edit the videos, regardless, such as clipping out boring bits, fast-forwarding maybe, if you prefer to fast-forward, splitting the video into different parts, and audio leveling, audio dynamic range compression, that kind of thing. These are tasks that, if you're any good at editing videos, you do every single time. There are lots of other editing tasks that you don't know what you're going to want to do. Those, of course, you just have to do, but all of these basic tasks that are done every time ought to be automatable, and indeed they are. So plip is divided into two components. Part is a monitor that goes into OBS. In theory, it's portable. We could make a plugin for a different system. This is a very early release of plip, and so all I have right now is OBS. And it is a plugin. It is installable as a plugin. I should mention that, unfortunately, this plugin needs to access some internals of OBS in order to actually get the current time. Thanks, OBS, for not exposing the time in any way. So, as a consequence, it might break with new versions of OBS Studio, but the source is available. It can always be rebuilt. Now, all OBS plugins, you have to actually add it to the scene. So let's quickly add it to the scene. We now have plip util in the scene. It does actually display something. Let me just stretch this up big enough so you can see. Typically, you're not going to want to show that, but that just shows the recording status. I can, of course, hide that like I would hide anything else. So typically, you're going to want to hide that. I'm going to leave it in just so that I can show that it shows the recording status here. The more important thing is down in the status bar, it says monitor ready. So this is a recording monitor, and it serves multiple purposes. The primary thing it does is keep track whenever you do a hotkey, and it has configurable hotkeys, to record what actions you want to perform at those hotkeys. So if you want to cut out a section, if you want to fast forward a section, or you can just leave general purpose marks. This will be clearer as I show it, so let's just show it. I'll start recording. There we go. I've got that recording. Now, down at the bottom in the status bar, we see that this says mon, as in monitor, and it shows time 0. By default, it clips out the beginning so that you can choose exactly where you want to clip in. Now, of course, we could clip, quote-unquote, the video just by stopping and starting the recording over and over again, but this is a nicer way because it has it all in one file. And so when I want to start recording, I press the hotkey I've associated with start and stop, and it turns green. The version in the scene also turns green. Of course, we can hide that, and it starts counting up. So this is the amount of time that is actually clipped in, which is naturally different from the amount of time we've actually been recording. Now let's say that at this point, I know I'm going to do something I want to clip out. Maybe I'm editing I'm going into the menu, editing some settings, something else dull like that I want to actually clip out of the video. I simply press the start-stop button again. It's still recording, so if I later decide I want some of this footage, it's not lost, it's there, I've been recording the whole time. And when I start again, it will start from that point. Now, naturally, I haven't actually shown that here because I'm recording a recording, so I want to tell myself to, in the future, edit in what actually happened when I clipped out in OBS. Well, the second hotkey button is a simple mark button that tells me that there is some future editing task I want to perform, and it simply puts the timestamps whenever I've made a mark into a file called marks.txt. So, I press my mark hotkey, it briefly turns purple to indicate that it's made a mark, and maybe I'll say, future Yahweasel, now cut in that bit to show what happens when you clip out a section of the video. Now let's say that at this point, I know I'm going to do something I want to clip out. Maybe I'm I'm going into the menu, editing some settings, something else dull like that I want to actually clip out of the video. I simply press the start-stop button again. It will start from that point. And there you are. That's how the mark button works, and that's how clipping works as well. The third hotkey is fast motion. So if I have a section of the video that I don't want to actually clip out, but I just want to fast forward it so it'll go by more quickly, I press my fast motion hotkey. This shows as yellow. The monitor stops counting up because this is not really being included, or at least the time isn't being included. And then when I press start again, everything that was recorded during that yellow section will, in processing, get fast forwarded. Again, all of this is being recorded normally. It's all going to happen later. All of this clip information happens in processing. There is one final hotkey, so when I'm done, and let's say I want to switch to a new episode or something like that, there is a reset hotkey that resets the monitor, but it also leaves a mark that says this is the point where we're going to split the video, and so it'll actually make it into separate video files. Again, of course, you could do that just by stopping and restarting the recording. Do that if that's more convenient to you. To me, it's a slightly more convenient just to leave that reset mark and have that happen in processing. So when we start, it starts counting up from 0 again, and this is, of course, a new episode and would be put into a new file. Now, this is the plip distribution. This is the rest of plip. In particular, it's the processing tools. The monitor will also be included in this once I make a public release. I have just stuck that in C plip. You can put it wherever you want to, of course. And I should say, I don't use Windows, so this is not a good setup. Perhaps in the future, somebody will help me make it a little bit better. This is a bunch of command line tools, and most people are not going to be comfortable with that. Just to make it a little bit easier to use, there's this plip install.bat that does have to be run as administrator. And when you run it, it will show this. It will do some successful operations and say the context menu entries have been created. The purpose of that is so that you can simply right-click, and then here's process recording. So process recording takes this raw recording that was created by OBS, and the marks, so when you use the OBS monitor, it outputs all of that mark information you made, all of those times you clicked a button, to a .mark file. Out here is just what I named my recording. You can, of course, name that whatever you want to in OBS. And if I do plip process recording, then, well, it does a bunch of commands, and it extracts all of the audio tracks. In this case, I had a lot of audio tracks, and performs all of the processing on all of those audio tracks. And when it's done with the audio tracks, then it will perform the processing on the video tracks, so that everything is clipped to the same times, all of the audio is leveled, the fast forward is implemented, all of these files will be consistent with each other, and they'll be ready to load into whatever video editor you actually use. Now, when that's done, it will have created all of these files. It's worth mentioning it creates those in the directory with the actual recording file, so make sure that directory is otherwise clear, or it will dump stuff where you don't want it. And in particular, since we had two parts, it's created video1 and video2.mkv. That file format is configurable, but I'll mention Matroshka is the best file format, it's what you should use. The audio is split up into each of its requisite tracks. These track names are configurable in OBS. I have them default A, game A, voice 1A, voice 2A. Those are just my names. You can name them whatever you want to in OBS. It will use those names right out of the recording file. And so, for example, voice 2A, which is my primary microphone, it has recorded and processed. This is the complete processed file, and it is split it into two parts for the two separate bits that I recorded with the split in the middle. So if I open up video 1, you'll see indeed this is what I recorded. It's not particularly exciting, I must admit, but it does work. That little bit there was a moment of hiding the plip thing, if you don't recall my showing how to hide it. Oops, popping in from the future, I forgot to mention, it also creates marks.txt, or in this case, because I've split it into two recordings, marks1.txt and marks2.txt. That's not what I wanted to do, Windows, thank you. All that contains is timestamps that say, in this case, in this video, at 1 minute and 6 seconds, I made a mark. You remember that I made a mark just to, well, talk about making marks. And this is the location where that happened in video1.mkv, wherever that's gone to. So in this video, as well as in the audio tracks, which are of course all synchronized to that, at 1 minute and 6 seconds, that's where I pressed that mark button. So this way I know very quickly where the places I need to jump to in editing, where I made a mark and I knew that I needed to do something in the future. And each of the audio files has been processed. So if I take, this is the processed audio, if I looked at the original audio, which hopefully this can open. Sorry about that, little bit of fussing around. Can you tell that I don't normally use Windows? So this is the processed audio. As you can see, it's, if nothing else, substantially louder than the original audio. But if I amplify the original audio to the max, you can see it's still more filled out. That's the dynamic range compression. This has compressed it into a smaller dynamic range and made it a consistent level. Now, precisely what it does is configurable. It's configurable through a file called plip.ini. I have an example plip.ini, which is indeed the default it uses if you don't specify. And plip.ini isn't particularly documented. In fact, this is wrong. This is not the default. That's the default from Linux, so I'll have to update that file. Anywho, it's not particularly documented, but in the bottom of everything, these are just filters for FFmpeg. So if you look up FFmpeg, look up FFmpeg's filters, you can use those to do whatever you might want to do. In particular, I'll mention that the default video filter is null, which means no filter at all. Let's say that I wanted to do a more interesting filter. Well, I need to create a plip.ini file. Let's name this plip.ini. I want a filter. It's a video filter. Let's say that I want to crop this, and I'm going to crop it to 720 by 720. This is FFmpeg filter syntax, so you would have to know FFmpeg filters to know exactly how to do this. And I'm going to crop it to 00, which means the left 720 by 720. I close that. Now, it's already processed the video, so I'm going to delete these so that it will reprocess it. And then I right-click and tell it to process the recording again. And here we are. I have video1.mkv, which is now, bizarrely, a 720 by 720 square video. Similarly, video2.mkv is processed in exactly the same way. Now, of course, I could have done that in a full GUI video editor, and that would have been a little bit clearer how to do it, but the nice thing about plip is that that's automatic. So if I take this plip.ini, and I put it into a upper directory, then every video I edit in a subdirectory of that, so in this case the demo directory is under this plip directory where I've put my plip.ini, if I do a rendering task from here, then it will use that plip.ini, and thus it's outputting a video in 720 by 720, exactly as that plip.ini specifies. And so, if you keep your recordings in a fairly sensible directory structure, then you can always have a single plip.ini at the top that says any filters you want, and they will automatically be applied to every recording, every process within that directory. Now, all of this seems a bit complicated, and that's because it is. This is a very, very early release of plip. I use plip myself, I have for years, but I never originally sort of intended for it to be public. It was just meant to make my tasks easier. It is now public because I feel like it may be useful to others, and I sort of gauged support, and people do seem to want it. It needs a GUI, it needs for plip.ini to be better documented, it needs lots of things, but this is literally considered releasing it yesterday, released it today. So this is the state it's in. It will likely improve, but I do need feedback on what ought to change. So either leave comments on this video, or if you found this from Reddit, you can of course comment on the Reddit thread. For things that ought to be added or improved. I'll mention that plip.ini can do vastly more than I'm showing. It can do things like flattening game audio when you're speaking so that the level is always the same, but the game audio ducks when you're talking. All that kind of thing, that can be done in plip.ini. But, well, plip.ini isn't particularly documented right now. Hopefully that will change at some point. If somebody who is a more Windows-centric programmer than me wants to, say, make an installer, or maybe even a GUI, then that would be great. I don't want to do that, because I don't even use Windows, and this is fine for me. I don't really want my life to be spent maintaining this thing. So you can, do what you like with it. The source code is available. You can use that however you'd like to, I suppose. It's not well documented, of course, because, again, I built this for myself. But, like I said, this is a very preliminary release. I'm just hoping it might help somebody, or that somebody might find it useful. That's it. That's all I have to say about Plip for the moment. Quite probably, if things change, this video will be replaced with a much later one that shows the nice GUI or what have you. That'll have to happen in the future. Until then, thanks for watching. Cheers from Yahweasel.